Okay, this is the next video in our series for Unit 2, the growth of Afro-Eurasian trade and its effects. In this video, we're going to focus on the environmental consequences of this connectivity. So when we look at the big picture, this unit is guided by the question, what caused the growth of Afro-Eurasian networks of exchange from 1200 to 1450? And what were the economic, the cultural, the technological, and the biological effects? So, this is what we're focusing on Afro-Eurasia, Africa, Europe, and Asia together. And what's happening is the tapestry straits that we talked about in the first unit, well, they're becoming linked by various trade routes. Red, the Silk Road; blue, the Indian Ocean system; brown, the Trans-Sahara system. And so this connection is going to be caused by many things, but it's going to lead to this massive area of economic, cultural, technological, and finally biologic exchanges. So our thesis statement that we're working with is that exchanges over the Afro-Eurasian networks of exchange grew after 1200 due to the rise of land empires and trading states, innovations in transportation and commercial technology, and the rising Western demand. This growth led to wider and deeper economic exchanges of luxury goods, the diffusion of religious ideas and innovations, and the movement of plants and disease pathogens. So in this video, we're focusing on that last little bit, the environmental consequences of connectivity. And this is the essential question that you're going to need to be able to answer and take notes on from this video. What were the biological effects of the growth of the Afro-Eurasian networks of exchange from 1200 to 1450? So to begin with, we're going to focus on our thesis. So the general answer to the question is this. From 1200 to 1450, there were increased diffusion of crops and pathogens across the Afro-Eurasian trade routes. This led to larger food supplies, but also death and the end of the Silk Road. So essentially what we're talking about is this connection is also going to allow a lot of biologics. So in a second, we're going to have to figure out what we mean by biologics. And the effects not only would include the good stuff like larger food supplies, but also death due to sickness. And eventually, this is going to end the Silk Road, and it's also going to end the tapestry period. So a biological exchange is defined by a transfer of a plant, an animal, and/or a disease from one area to another. So what we're really talking about is not the selling of the plant or the selling of the animal. What we're talking about is taking seeds that grow the plant and we're moving them to areas of a similar climate, or we're moving animals to a new area of a similar climate, or we're spreading diseases. So to give you an example, and this is not something that will be on the test, but we're going to show a biological exchange of an animal, and that animal is the chicken. So the area in yellow is essentially the area where the chicken was first wild, but also domesticated a very long time ago, 6,000 BCE. And then over time, people like chickens because they lay eggs, and if you fry them up, they taste pretty good. And so by 3000 to 2000 BCE, it spreads to the green area. Then 700 to 100 BCE, it spreads to the pinkish orangish area. And then finally, it spreads to North America, 1450 with the age of exploration. Now, the other thing is that this area of Georgia is a major chicken producer. And the funny thing is, a lot of the chickens that we raise here actually go back to China, one of the areas where the chicken was native to. So what we're literally doing is we're not selling processed, cooked chicken. We're selling chickens, or chickens are moving and they're being adopted to new environments. This also happens with plants, and it also happens with diseases. So, what were the biological effects of the growth of the Afro Eurasian networks of exchange during our time period? Well, we begin with Champa rice. Now, we know Champa rice from Unit 1, and we know that Champa rice is native to the Champa state, which is in what's now Vietnam. It's a very, very sturdy rice that grows in a variety of environments, and also it grows quicker. So instead of just one rice harvest a year, you can get two. Through the tribute system, when the Song Chinese reached out to other areas, one of the things that the Song brought in was Champa rice. Not the actual rice, but the plants to grow. So they developed certain technologies, such as terrace farming and irrigation, to grow this Champa rice, get two harvests, and feed their growing population. Another one would be bananas. Bananas, also called plantains, and you can see the other names there, were native to Indonesia. They grew there consistently. And over time, what's happening is sailors from these islands using the monsoon sail in this direction, eventually getting to Madagascar and also spreading bananas there. Bananas grow very well in sub-Saharan Africa because they can adapt very easily to the very shallow topsoil. And so bananas are planted here, and eventually become one of the staple crops, which supports the people there. Later, bananas are going to be picked up by the Europeans and brought to areas such as Cuba, Hispaniola, Central America, and Northern South America as a means or a food to feed the slaves, and eventually they become part of the American diet. So we have basically two positive biological exchanges, both involving food. First, we have Champa rice from Vietnam into China, and then later we have bananas from Indonesia into Africa. Now, animals by this time really had already been diffused. So if I'm writing on an SAQ, the domestication of the horse, the domestication of the camel, that's already been done prior to this time period. So we're really not seeing any animal biological diffusion, but we are seeing a disease, and that disease is the Black Death. The Black Death is native to an area in China around a lake. For hundreds and thousands of years, this plague has been there. It lives in the stomach and the bloodstream of the rats that are native to that region. Well,
Good morning, teachers. Will Mr. Browder and Mr. Hemmings please join the 504 meeting that is currently in progress? Mr. Browder and Mr. Hemmings, please join the 504 meeting that is currently in progress. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Before this time period, what we have is no spread because there's no connection there. People just didn't go there. But as trade is opening up through the Silk Road and then intensified by the Mongols, then we begin to see the spread of the plague. It first goes into China, carried by the fleas on the rats, then later travels the Silk Road, entering Samarkand, Baghdad, other cities along the trade routes, and eventually getting into Europe. The first contact in Europe was from a group of sailors who were escaping a city called Kaffa and brought the plague into Europe. And continuing to follow the trade routes within Europe, the plague spread, and it spread, and it spread, and it spread. So when we look at this, yes, we know that the plague spread across these entire trade routes. Well, what's happening is that as people are dying, as the plague is being carried, trade is slowing down. What really causes the spread of the bubonic plague is not only the intensified trade, but the effects of something known as the Little Ice Age. Prior to 1300, represented by the red line, the world was in what's known as the medieval warm period. This is higher average temperatures, which are going to lead to longer growing seasons and a more comfortable life. Because of this, trade takes off. Because of this, people grow more food and are allowed to specialize, and population greatly grows. Now, what happens is as the temperature begins to drop, we begin to see some problems. There's a shortage of food. Trade is beginning to slow down because food prices go up, and essentially people have less income to pay for trade. Also, the animals that carry the Black Death, which is the Asian black rat, they too have to migrate because the grasses and the land that they lived in originally become very dry. Well, this, along with the intensification of trade, leads to the spread of the Black Death. So this is the Asian black rat. This is the carrier of the plague. And what happens is as these black rats migrate and as the black rats follow the trade routes, the plague just simply spreads from entry pot city to entry pot city. So the main culprit is going to be this virus. This virus lives in the stomach and the bloodstream of the Asian black rat. Now, as we know, animals have fleas, and fleas like to suck blood. And so when the fleas suck the blood of the black rat, they also ingest the plague virus. So the flea drinks the rat blood that carries the virus and the bacteria. And inside the flea, the disease begins to multiply. The one thing about the bubonic plague is it multiplies very quickly. As they bite humans, they regurgitate blood into the human's bloodstream, and the human is infected. So you're talking about between 2 and 7 days to get to this point right here. So what we have is the biological effects. We see positives in the spread of champa rice and the spread of bananas, but we see a negative in the spread of the Black Death along these trade routes. And essentially what the overall effect is this: trade slows down, eventually grinding to a halt. All those cities along the Silk Road suffer outbreaks of plague and become greatly depopulated. And so the Silk Road is going to die. So when trade regenerates after the plague goes away for the first time, Europeans are going to begin to seek direct maritime routes to be able to find access to luxury goods. So the mortality rate of the plague was between 35 and 70%, a total of 25 million dead. And essentially what it did is it ends the Silk Road. It ends European interest in trade. It ends Chinese production. It ends the entry pot cities. It also leads to the fall of the trading states in Africa and the trading states in India. So those were the biological effects of the growth of the networks of exchange from 1200 to 1450.